Joining me now, NBC News Justice correspondent, the man who's been leading our coverage all week long, Pete Williams, former director of the National Counterterrorism Center and now an NBC national security analyst, Michael Leiter, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and a former FBI agent, Michigan Congressman Mike Rogers, former Secretary of Homeland Security under President Bush, now chairman and co-founder of the Chertoff Group, Michael Chertoff. In just a few minutes, we'll be joined as well by the Assistant Majority Leader, Dick Durbin. But I want to begin here with Pete and Mike Leiter on the latest in terms of what we're tracking. Pete Williams, a big question at this moment is, was there a foreign connection to terrorism? What do we know?
Well, we don't know the answer to that question. The big gap here is, what was the older brother doing for 6 months in Russia last year? He leaves in January, he arrives in July, and the Russians have told the FBI that they were a little worried about him. But what was he doing during all that time in Russia? His father says he was visiting him, that he went to see his family, that he went to renew his Russian passport while he was waiting to get American citizenship. He was here as a lawful permanent resident. But did he, the thing I think that's the biggest question for investigators now is, A, why did he turn this way? But B, where did he get his expertise in explosives? Where did he practice them? It seems really unlikely that these two bombs successfully were detonated without some practice runs. Where did he learn to do that? Where did he practice it? Those are the big questions.
And we look at the pictures of these suspects and some biographical information that we have. Jahar, who is a surviving suspect here, he's Tsarnaev. He is the one who's now in custody. He's in the hospital. Tamerlan had older brother, born in Kyrgyzstan, comes in 2002, becomes a U.S. citizen, 9/11/2012. He was a wrestler. He was enrolled at the University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth, had a scholarship. So many friends coming out of the woodwork talking so positively about him. Tamerlan, who is his older brother, is the one who does that travel. He comes later than his younger brother. He was married, had a 3-year-old daughter, had a domestic violence incident. He dropped out of community college. He was a competitive boxer. People speaking very positively about him, but Chairman Mike Rogers, now we have more information about some evidence of him sort of dropping out of society, as it were. Information after he comes back from foreign travel, postings on his YouTube account and other social media indicating that he'd had exposure to jihadist elements, whether that's connected to Chechnya and the struggles there against Russia or otherwise. What do you know this morning, and what do you want to know?
Yeah, well, it's important to understand why, in fact, the FBI interviewed him in the first place. So they had information from a foreign intelligence service that they were concerned about his possible radicalization. And so they went from there. The FBI did their due diligence and did a very thorough job about trying to run that to ground. And then asked some more help from that intelligence service to try to get further clarification. And unfortunately, that intelligence service stopped cooperating. So what happens is that case gets closed down. He, we believe, may have actually traveled on an alias to get back to his home country. And that 7 months, 6.5 months or so becomes extremely important. So you know he had some radicalization before he left. You know that he didn't probably travel on his own name or some variation of his own name. And when he comes back, he has a renewed interest in that radicalization belief process. So he's very devout. We know he was very religious and devout and very active in the Boston Islamic Society and a devout attender of prayers in mosque on Fridays. So you see something happening, and you can see it happening after that travel. And so that 6.5 months becomes incredibly important. And it would lead one to believe that that's probably where he got that final radicalization to push him to commit acts of violence, and where he may have received training on what we ultimately saw last Monday.
As I get Mike Leiter and Mike Chertoff into this, we heard from their uncle yesterday on the Today program, and he talked about a change that he noticed in Tamerlan once he returned from that travel. Let me play a portion of that.
I saw what happened to the last time I spoke with Tamerlan in 2009, and I was shocked when I heard his words, his phrases. When he started talking, every other word, he started sticking in words of God. Devotion, it wasn't devotion. It was something, as it's called, being radicalized.
Important to you, Mike Leiter?
I think very important. A lot of people think this is an atypical story involving people who've lived here for a long time, are very stable, and then become radicalized. And regrettably, it isn't. In the Times Square bombing, we had a case where someone had lived here for 13 years, had an MBA, had worked for an American company, and then tried to bomb Times Square. The challenge here, David, is that there are lots and lots of people who go through these crises and become more radicalized, but very, very few of them actually become mobilized and become terrorists. And that's an incredibly hard piece for the FBI and others.
And you're speaking, Mike Chertoff, to one of the big elements here this morning, and that is, did the FBI miss something? They were on him, Tamerlan, that is. They talked to him. They tracked his digital footprint. Chairman Rogers talking about him then traveling on an alias, which I had not heard before. So the red flag is up, but then they closed the books on him because after they took a look at him, they determined there's no threat here.
I think that is going to be a big question, David, and I go further than that and say, if they had an indication of interest by a foreign service and a connection to an overseas group in Chechnya or in the North Caucasus, you would have wanted to have our foreign intelligence capabilities focused on him. So I think as they look back over this episode, they're going to want to make sure that a ball wasn't dropped either domestically or overseas.
Mike Leiter, you concerned about that?
It's not clear to me that the reporting to the FBI actually said he was associated with a terrorist group. That he might have been radicalized, but that's really very different and might raise a, if not maybe a yellow flag, but I don't think a red flag to the FBI.
Chairman Rogers, you've been an FBI agent. You're now chair of the Intelligence Committee. Was something missed here?
Well, we looked at and talked about what exactly the FBI did, and it's important to note that that case was closed prior to his travel.
Yep.
So I don't think they missed anything. If you looked at their digital footprint, and they did, if they went through all their database checks, and they did, and you did the thorough interviews that you would expect them to do in a case like this, they did. And at some point, they asked, is there more clarifying information, and never received that clarifying information. At some point, they have nothing. And so you can't ask them to do something with nothing. I think they prudently said, well, there's nothing to see here at this point. Now, remember, he then left and traveled and came back. Now, that's a different place. They had no further information indicating that until, of course, after the event itself.
And it's important to point out...
We'll go through and review all that. That's important to do. But I think they were very prudent and very thorough by my review of what happened prior to his travel.